When they got to the motel, Jessica was already there, and so was John. He stood up when Charlie walked in. I was worried about you. I thought maybe I could sleep on the floor. He waited nervously for her reaction, as though he had realized only upon seeing her that he might have overstepped her boundaries. On another day in another place, Charlie might have been annoyed by his excessive concern. But here in Hurricane, she was glad to have it. We should be all together, she thought. It's safer. She wasn't really afraid, but unease still clung to her like cobwebs, and John's presence had been a calming one ever since they arrived. He was still looking at her, waiting for her response, and she smiled at him. As long as you don't mind sharing the floor with Jason, she said. He grinned. Just let me have a pill and I'll be fine. Marla tossed him one and he stretched elaborately, sat on the ground, and lay down. They all went to bed almost immediately. Charlie was exhausted now that her injury had been clean and bound. The adrenaline of the night left her body all at once, leaving her drained and a little shaky. She didn't even bother changing into pajamas. She just collapsed on the bed next to Jessica and was asleep in seconds. Charlie woke just after dawn when the sky was still pale and a little pink. She looked around the room. The others couldn't be up for hours, she suspected, but she was too alert to try to fade back into sleep. She grabbed her shoes and, stepping over Jason's and John's sleeping bodies, went outside. The motel was set a little way back off the road, trees spread thickly around and behind it. Charlie sat down on the curb to put on her shoes, wondering if she could go for a walk in the woods without getting lost. The air was crisp, and she felt renewed and energized by the brief night's sleep. Her arm hurt and a dull pulsing pain that kept drawing her attention, but it had now bled through the bandages. Charlie usually found it easy to ignore the pain when she knew she was not in danger from it. The words were inviting, and she decided to risk getting lost. As she was about to stand, John sat down beside her. Morning, he said. His clothes were rumpled from his night on the motel floor, and his hair was a mess. Shirley held back a laugh. What? He said. She shook her head. You look like your old self today, she said. He looked up and down at himself and shrugged. Clothes don't make the man. Why are you going up so early? I don't know. Couldn't sleep. What about you? Somebody stepped on me. Shirley winced. Sorry, she said, and he laughed. I'm just kidding. I was awake. I was going to go for a walk, she said, pointing at the tree line. Out there somewhere. Do you want to come? Yeah, definitely. They headed into the woods, and John hung back for a moment and surreptitiously retucked his shirt, trying to smooth out the wrinkles. Shirley pretended not to notice. There was no path, so they made their own way through the trees at random, glancing back now and then to be to be sure they could still make out the motel parking lot. John stumbled over a falling branch, and Shelley reached out with her good arm to catch him before he fell. Thanks, he said. Strong arm, too. Well, you caught me yesterday, so it's only fair that I catch you back. Now we're even, she said. She looked around. The motel was scarcely in sight, and she felt confident. Made safe by the woods. She could say anything here, and it would be all right. She leaned back against a tree, picking idly at the bark behind her. You know, Freddy's wasn't the first restaurant, she said abruptly, surprising herself, and Jonna looked at her quizzically, like he had not quite heard her. She didn't want to say it again, but she forced herself to. Freddy's isn't my dad's first restaurant. There was a diner, a little one. It was before my mom left. I had no idea, John said slowly. Where was it? I don't know. It's one of those memories from when you were a little kid, you know? You only remember from the things that are right around you. I remember the linoleum in the kitchen floor. It was this black and white diamond pattern, but I don't remember where the restaurant was or what it was called. Yeah, John said. We took a vacation to the theme park when I was like 3, and all I remember was the back seat of the car. Like we like So where were they there? His voice dropped a little quieter when he had said it, almost reflexively. Charlie nodded. Yeah, there was a bear and a rabbit, I think. Sometimes the details get mixed up in my head. They're not like normal memories, she said, needing him to understand the story's defects before she told him the rest. It's like when you have a realistic dream and it's not in the morning, you're not safe of it or if it really happened. It's just impressions, little snatches of time. She trailed off. She wasn't explaining it right. She was choosing all the wrong words. She was reaching back too far in her memory to a time when she did not yet speak. It was a time when she did not have the words to name the things she saw, and so now when she tried to recall them, the words could never be right. She looked at John. She was watching her patiently, waiting for her to go on. She wanted to tell him his story from her life that she had never told. It was not even a story, not really, just something that nagged at the edge of her mind, something flashing by randomly in the corner of her eye. She was not entirely certain it was real, so she told no one. She wanted to tell John because she wanted to speak to another person, because he looked at her with trusting eyes and she knew he would be listening and believe her, because he had cared for her for a long time, because he had caught out her when she fell, and he had come here to sleep and keep watch all night, and thought a problematic, slightly cruel part of her because he was not part of her real life. She could tell him this, tell him anything, and when she returned home, it would be as though it never happened. She wanted suddenly to touch him, have confirmation that he was really there and this was not another dream. She reached out her hand to him and, surprised but glad, he took it. He stayed where he was, as if afraid at moving in closer and would scare her. They stayed that way for a moment and then she let go and she told him the story the way she spoke in her head, the memories of a small child mixing in the things she had come to understand as she grew older. There was another restaurant, rustic and small, with red checkered cloths on the tables and a kitchen you could see into from the dining area, and they were all there together. Her father and her mother and us. When Charlie was very young, she was never alone. There was Charlie and there was a little boy so close to Charlie that remembering him was like remembering a part of herself. They were always together. They learned to say we before she learned to say I. They played together on the floor of the kitchen, sometimes drawing pictures while hiding under a hardwood table. She remembered the shuffling of feet, the shadows of customers walking by. Light was broken by a slowly turning fan and thrown across the floor of ribbons. She remembered the smell of an ashtray and the hearty laughter of adults lost in a good story while their children played. Very often she would hear her father's laugh echoing from a distant corner as he talked to customers. When Charlie pictured him laughing like that now, it was like a little ache, a sticking feeling in the center of her chest because his eyes were bright and his smile was easy because he wanted them all to be part of the restaurant to share his work freely. He was yet untouched by grief, and so well he took a little like the father she truly remembered. He was not the same man at all. Shirley was looking down at the ground as she talked, at the dirt and stones and cracked remains of leaves, and her hand was at her back, stripping bark from the tree. Does that hurt the tree? She thought, and forced her hands away, knotting them in front of her. The restaurant was open until late at night, and so when they began to falter, Charlie and the little boy would crawl into the pantry with blankets and soft toys to sleep until it was time to close. She remembered using sacks of flour as pillows, big bags almost as long as they were tall. They would snuggle together and whisper words of nonsense that would mean deep things until only to the two of them. and Charlie would drift into sleep, half listening to the warm sounds of the restaurant, the clank of dishes and the murmur of grown up talk, and the sound of the bear and the rabbit as they danced to their chiming tunes. They loved animals, the yellowish brown bear and the magic rabbit, who wandered the restaurant dancing and singing for customers, and sometimes just for Charlie and the little boy. They sometimes move stiffly and mechanically, and sometimes with fluid human movements. And while the boy liked the animals best when they acted like people, Charlie liked them the other way. Their tilted movements, their lifeless eyes, and their occasional glitches fascinated her. They acted alive, but were not. The narrow yet bottomless chasm between those things, alive and not alive, enthralled her, though she would never be able to explain why. I think there were customers, Charlie said now, still looking down at the ground. The animals weren't always robots. The bear and the bunny were costumes, and sometimes people wore them. And sometimes my father put it onto one of his robots, and you would always tell which is by the way they dance. Charlie stopped. There was more, but she could not bring herself to speak. There was something else that made her lock down her memory and force the memory away. The part that made her unwilling to ask Aunt Jen for answers, because she was afraid of what those answers might be. Shelley had not dared to look at John the whole time she was talking, staring only at the ground and her hands and her sneakers. Now she did look at him, and he was rapt, seeming almost to be holding his breath. He waited, not wanting to speak until he was sure she was finished. That's all I remember, she said at last, even though it was a lie. Wait, who was the little boy? John said. Charlie shook her head, frustrated that she had not understood. He was mine, she said. I meant, he was my brother. We were the same. She was speaking childishly as if the memory had taken hold of her, forcing her to progress. She cleared her throat. Sorry, she said, speaking more slowly, trying to choose her words with care. I think he was my twin brother. She saw John open his eyes, about to ask the question, what happened to him? But there must have been something in her face. Something warning, because he held it back and said instead, do you think that place was around here? I mean, I guess it could have been anywhere, another state even. I don't know, Charlie said slowly, looking over her shoulders, then up at the trees. This all feels the same. It feels like I could walk around any corner and it would be there. Her voice began to break. I want to find it, she added suddenly, and as soon as she said it, it was what she wanted to do. Well, what do you remember about it? John said enthusiastically, almost lunging forward like an eager dog in a lead. He must have been dying to go looking from the moment she mentioned the place. Charlie smiled but shook her head. I really don't remember much, she said. I don't know how much help I can actually be. Like I said, the things I remember are just little scraps. They're not information. It's like a picture book. She closed her eyes, trying to see the place in her mind's eye. The floor would shake. She lifted her head as though to become clear. A train? She asked as though John would know. I remember this thunderous sound every day. It was the biggest sound I ever had. I don't mean loud, I mean you could feel in your whole body. It was like rumbling right through your chest. And must have been close to some tracks then, right? John said. Yeah, Charlie said with a spark of hope. There was a tree out front, she went on. Like, it looked like an old angry monster hunched forward and wizened, with two giant gnarly branches ranging out like arms. Whenever we left for the night, I hid my face in my father's shirt so I wouldn't have to see it as we walked by. What else? John said. Were there stories or other restaurants? No, I mean, I don't think so. I'm sorry. She scratched her head. It's gone. It's not enough, John said, a little frustrated. I could have been anywhere. A tree, and a train. There must have been something else I can remember. Anything? No, Charlie said. The more she pushed herself to remember, the harder it got. She was grasping herself violently, and it was like trying to get a hold of living creatures. As if the memories saw her coming and slipped away. She tossed out fragments as she managed to catch them. The tablecloths, red and white, checked, and made of real cloth, not plastic. She remembered grabbing at one, instead on her feet, and the whole table setting falling down on top of her. Plates and glasses shattered around her as she covered her head. Charlotte, are you okay? Her father's voice seemed unclearer than ever. There was a squeaky floorboard in the corner of the diner that Charlie liked to push on, making it sing as if it made music. There was a picnic table out back where they used to sit in the sun. One leg of it sinking in the soft ground. There was the song her parents used to sing in the car whenever they came home from a trip. They would burst into it, then they were a little way from home, and then they started laughing as if they had done something clever. As nothing helpful, Charlie said, just kid stuff. She felt a little lightheaded. She had spent so many years avoiding these memories, her mind shied away of it from snakes. Having it done, she felt strange and a little guilty, like she had done something wrong, but she also felt something that joy had been joy, in the signs she never allowed herself to think of. The memories of that time were unsafe. They were traps and snares, wrought in their very substance, but there were precious things among them. Sorry, she said. I can't remember more. No, that's really impressive. I can't believe you remember that far back at all, he said. I didn't mean to push you, he added a little sheepishly. Denda looked thoughtful. What was the song? I think it was the same one they danced to at Freddy's, Charlie said. No, the one your parents sang in the car. Oh, she said. I don't remember if I remember it. It wasn't really a song, you know. It was just a little line. He closed her eyes, picturing the car, trying to envision the backs of her parents' heads as though she was still in the back seat. She waited, trusting her mind to give it up, and after a moment it did. She hummed it just 6 notes. We're back in harmony, she sang, and they'd, harmonize. She added, embarrassed by her parents even now. John's expression was blank for a moment as the words at first seemed meaningless, but then his eyes lit with promise. Charlie, there's a town north of here called New Harmony. Huh? Was all she said for a moment. She listened to the words in her head, waiting for them to soften inspiration trip a memory, but they did not. I feel like that should ring a bell, but it doesn't, she said. Sorry, I mean, it doesn't sound wrong, but it doesn't sound right either. She was disappointed, but John still had that thoughtful look in his face. Come on, he said, extending his hand. Charlie wiped her cheek and took a shaky breath, then looked at him. She nodded with an exhausted smile and got to her feet. Should we wait for everyone to wake up? John said as they emerged into the parking lot after a brisk walk back. No, Charlie said with an unexpected vehemence. I don't want everyone there for this, she added in softer tones. Just the thought of the whole group going along made her anxious. It was too risky, too private. She had no idea what they might find or what it might do to her, and she couldn't abide the thought of making those discoveries with an audience. Okay, John said, just us then, just us. Charlotte went inside and grabbed her car keys, moving slowly as to not disturb others. As she was heading back to the door, Jason stirred and opened his eyes, looking up at her like he wasn't quite sure how she was. She put up a finger to her lips. He nodded sleepily and closed his eyes again, and she hurried out the door. She tossed the keys to John and got in the passenger seat. There's the map in here, she said, Jocelyn opened the glove box door. The map fell out and amid a pile of hand warmers and emergency food rations. Your aunt strikes again, John smiled. Charlie held the map just a few inches from her face. New Harmony was close, only about half an hour away. Think you can navigate? He asked. Aye, Captain, Charlie said. Turn left out of the lot. Thanks, he said worriedly. They drive back through the town and out the other side, the houses farther and farther between as they went. Each one stood solidarity, connected only by sagging power lines. Charlie watched the telephone poles and the dumping wires repeatedly, hypnotically, as if they were going on forever. Then blinked, breaking the spell. I have them, the mountains rise up ancient and dark against the clear blue sky. They looked more solid than anything else around them, more real, and maybe they were. They have been here, watching long before the houses, long before the roads, and they would be here long after they were all gone. Nice day, John said, and showed to him, turning her gaze from the view. Hey, yeah, Charlie said. I kind of forgot how beautiful it is out here. Yeah, he said. He was quiet for a moment, then looked at her sideways, and Charlie can't tell if he was being shy or keeping his eyes on the road. It's weird, he said at last. When I was a kid, the mountains kind of scared me, especially when we were driving in the dark. They were like some monstrous beast looming over us. He laughed a little, but Charlie did not. I know what you mean, she said, then grinned at him. I think they're pretty much just mountains, though. Hey, she said suddenly, you never told me about your story was about. My story? He flicked his eyes at her again, a little nervous. Yeah, you said I got a story published. What was it about? I mean, it was just a little magazine, just local, he said, still reluctant. Charlie waited, and finally he continued. It's called The Little Yellow House. It's about a boy, he said. He's 10 years old. His parents are fighting all the time, and he's afraid they're going to get divorced. They fight, and he overhears them saying awful things to each other. And he hides in his room with the door shut, but he can still hear them. So he starts looking at the window at the house across the street. They sort of kept their curtains open just enough that he can glimpse inside. He watches them go in and out of the house, this family, and he starts making up stories about them, imagining who they are and what they do. And after a while, they start feeling more real to him than his own family. He glanced at Charlie again as if trying to gauge her reaction, and Charlie smiled. He went on. So summer comes, and his family goes away for a week, and it's miserable. And when they got back, the family in the house across the street was moved away. There's nothing left, just a for sale sign hanging in front. Charlie nodded, waiting for him to continue, but he looked at her a little sheepishly. That's the end, he said. Oh, she said. That's really sad. He shrugged. I guess I'm working on something happy, though. What's that? He grinned at her. It's a secret. Charlie smiled back. It felt good to be out here. Good to just be driving out into the horizon. She cranked at the window down to put her arm into the air, enjoying the feel of the rushing wind. It's not wind rushing, it's us, she thought. What about you? Jen said. What about me? Charlie said, still happily playing against the wind. Come on, it's about the life of Charlie like these days. Charlie smiled at him and pulled her arm back into the car. I don't know, she said. Pretty boring. There was a part of her that did not want to tell him for the same reason. She wanted him with her now. She did not want her new life to mix with the old, but John had told her something real, something personal, and she felt like she owed him the same in return. It's all right, she said at last. My aunt is cool, even if she does something sometimes look at me like she is not quite sure where I came from. School's fine, I have friends and all that, but it feels so temporary. I have another year, but it feels like I'm already gone. Gone where? John asked, and Charlie shrugged. I wish I knew. College, I guess. I'm not sure what comes next. Nobody ever knows what comes next, I guess, he said. Do you? He stopped himself, but she parted him.